Oh, it looks like we're live. Ladies and gentlemen of the interwebs, I often say that people can indeed change your minds, for if you cannot change your mind, what's the use in having one? But typically when they change their minds, there must be some sort of reasonable arc that is believable from an evolutionary perspective. Behold, Laura Loomer has done, it's so many 180s right now, I think we're at about a 720 or a 1080.
I would like to apologize on your show to the people of Ukraine for some of the things that I've said about your country, because they've been very kind to me, and I highly doubt that I would be welcomed in Moscow. I mean, if I were to criticize anything about the government in Moscow, I'm sure the KGB would probably come find me in my hotel. So, you know, I doubt that I would have the same reception. I highly doubt that Vladimir Putin would offer to sit down with me for an interview. And it was very nice of President Zelensky. And it's been very nice of all your officials. I would like to apologize on your show to the people of Ukraine for some of the things that I've said about your country.
Did I take myself out of the stream the entire time? Let me start again, people. Let me go. You heard the audio of the video. I'll just go back and read these. I've just been reading these, and apparently no one's been hearing it. Go back all the way. Let me see. Where's my phone? Because I don't have my phone. Nobody texted me. Laura Loomer had tweeted out, Zelensky is a Nazi, Soros is a... No, we're going to go back to the first one right here. I got to read it so that everybody can hear. You can hear me now. I'm back in. I took myself out instead of adding the thing to the stage. This is a tweet from Laura Loomer, give or take 2024. Why is Zelensky always wearing the same stupid outfit? He has received over $400 billion from the U.S. taxpayers against our own will. Can this fake, quote, Jewish and, quote, actual Nazi go buy a suit? Would it kill him to dress with some respect? It's just so obnoxious. Then you got Zelensky as a Nazi. Soros is Jewish too, and he's also a Nazi. Perhaps these couples will atone for being Nazis today, given it's Yom Kippur. Then the last one. Soros, the last one here is... Because Zelensky is a Nazi and Ukrainians have always hated the Jews, Nazism is widely accepted in practice in Ukraine. We have given $250 billion to fund Nazism. Nazis and Muslims have united. Ukrainian Nazis gave Hamas weapons to use so they could slaughter Jews. And that was 2023. I'm going to take this out for a second. Two of those statements were factually correct. Well, I shouldn't say both. One of them I know is factually correct. The other we heard reports of. The one that is factually correct is that when Zelensky went to Canada and was given 2 standing ovations in Parliament because they had some 97-year-old man who had fought with I forget what it was, the Luftwaffe, the something 23rd Brigade, fought with the Nazis. So they go and they invite Zelensky, who's doing the rounds begging for more money, and they bring in an elderly gentleman who fought the Russians in World War II. And the idiots, liberals who invited him and conservatives who have no understanding of history, like the clapping seal buffoons that they are, give this guy a standing ovation, not understanding that the Ukrainians who fought the Russians in World War II, because, you know, things were a little different back then. The Russians were allies and the Ukrainians were fighting with the Nazis, were actual Nazis. So Laura Loomer, this is 2 to a little more years ago, is out on X citing actual fact when it comes to Zelensky bringing an actual Nazi to the Canadian Parliament and him getting a standing ovation. there were reports of some weapons found that were used by Hamas on October 7 or for terrorist purposes that had been procured apparently either from the black market or from Ukraine. Reports of that one I'm not confident enough to say definitively is a fact because I didn't see it with my own eyes. That was her 2 years ago. That video that we just saw of Laura Loomer apologizing, it's like a groveling, inorganic and almost looks like a hostage video of her on some Ukrainian television station saying this.
I would like to apologize on your show to the people of Ukraine for some of the things that I've said about your country, because they've been very kind to me, and I highly doubt that I would be welcomed in Moscow. I mean, if I were to criticize anything about the government in Moscow, I'm sure the KGB would probably come find me in my hotel. So
pause. There's two things right here. That I wouldn't be invited to Moscow. I'm telling you, that giddy laugh that we just saw right there was a laugh of desire. That, as far as I'm reading into this, I'd love to know what the behavior panel thinks. That laugh was her wanting that so badly to be invited to Russia.
In Moscow. I mean, if I were to criticize anything about the government in Moscow, I'm sure the KGB would probably come find me in my hotel. So
if I were to criticize the government in Moscow, I'm sure the KGB would come find me in my hotel. Some might say that that might be a little bit of what she is implicitly admitting. I don't know if this is done through threat, coercion, or sincere about face of everything that she said that was factually correct barely 2 years ago. Ukraine Nazi problem. There was an article back in, what was it, 2018? I mean, you can find this stuff as recently as today. You're not going to see it here. Let's just, here. Nazi symbols on Ukraine's front lines highlight thorny issues of history. We're not talking about conspiracy theories. We're not talking about rumors, innuendo. There was an article in 2018 talking about Ukraine's Nazi problem. And you go look at Laura Loomer's feed now. She did this interview with Zelensky, and it was like not lob ball questions. It was almost questions that were designed to, she said it herself, by the way, to counter propaganda in real time. So she is now the mouthpiece, facilitator of Zelensky and the Ukrainian regime to counter propaganda in real time. And you give people the benefit of the doubt until they no longer deserve it. You go through her feed right now. Here's her interview. Here's an interview, a repost of her interview with whatever on that show. I told President Zelensky about myself. I used to be anti-Ukraine. I even wrote a few articles for RT, Russia State Media, and I made several very main tweets about Zelensky. One time I even said he was a fake Nazi Jew. I confessed to all of this when I saw Zelensky. What is this confess? This is a struggle session? I fell for Russian propaganda? This is the other thing. Okay. So let's back this out a little bit. She fell for Russian propaganda. If someone assume that she fell for Russian propaganda, the only problem is the Ukrainian Nazi problem is not Russian propaganda. It's in the New York Times. The Ukrainian Nazi problem is well-known, well-established from back in the day. So it's not propaganda, but let's just operate on the basis that she fell for Russian propaganda to the point where she went out and posted countless, not just mean, not just vitriolic. If it's Russian propaganda and what she tweeted was wrong, it's horrible. There are a few things on earth that are worse than calling someone, wrongly calling someone a racist, wrongly calling someone an anti-Semite, wrongly calling someone a xenophobe, a homophobe, whatever. If she fell for Russian propaganda to that degree, how on earth does she ever expect anybody to take her judgment seriously going forward? Now, some of you out there are going to say, Viva, nobody takes her judgment seriously anyhow. Maybe not. And so it's either she fell for Russian propaganda or it was true at the time, and now she's trying to tell us that it was the fruits of Russian propaganda. More likely in this scenario is it wasn't Russian propaganda. It was actual information. And now the question is, why is this about face happening to such an unbelievable degree? Here, let me see. Why do you spend so much time on Loomer, Candace, and Tucker? These people have no power, Les Paul. Well, first of all, I don't spend that much time on Tucker. I spend time defending Tucker because I think he gets wrongly labeled an anti-Semite. don't agree with everything he says and does, but that's not the issue. The issue is whether or not the attacks on people are fair. I'm not attacking, attacking Candace is merely saying, hey, you've made a number of unsubstantiated claims. You are not just asking questions by making statements, and you're not reassessing your position when you realize that the statements you've made in the past are now contradicted by the facts and you have to move on and revise. You move on and revise too many times, you might be coming to conclusions or just asking questions a little too hastily. When it comes to Loomer, the question is this: is it an individual decision? Is it organic? Or is this now, and I think it's probably more of this, a priming of the public right now to say the new MAGA is going to be pro-supporting the war in Ukraine. Remember, anyone's going to try to, historically revise this. Trump ran on ending the Ukraine war on day one. Now, I'm one of the ones, so maybe I'll give Trump a benefit of the doubt that people don't think is warranted anymore. It was never intended to be on day one, 24 hours. It was intended to be quickly. He'll get in there. He knows he's not going to say what he has to do to end that war, but he's going to get in there and end that war. That was the platform. Now, initially, I never expected it to be on day one, but I did expect it to happen, soon enough. It took a long time. We're a year and a half into the administration. The war is still going on right now. And now it seems like the pivot is going to be America first, MAGA, Make America Great Again, is to support Ukraine, because supporting, not ending the war, but defending Ukraine against Russian aggression is now America first. And America first, by the way, that's the term that she used in that interview. And it feels like priming, and it looks like priming, and it sounds like priming, and it sounds like co-opting. When Make America Great Again, the OG MAGAs have, a lot of the OG MAGA have now backed out, have now said, I'm not MAGA anymore, I'm America first. Owen Schroyer, Alex Jones, Tucker Carlson, Sean Ryan, Joe Rogan, that other guy, Theo Vaughn. When they say, well, we were OG MAGA when we thought MAGA meant what we were told it meant. And they back out, and now you've got, they back out, and some of them go, now I'm America first, Thomas Massey. And you get a movement, America first. Well, what do you do now? If anybody's familiar with Operation COINTELPRO, you sow discord, you sow disagreement and distrust, and then you co-opt the terms. And so what it looks like right now is happening is George Orwell's switching the speech, mid-speech, to say we were always supporting a prolonged war with Ukraine. It's America first to do so. And where do you think they pivot after this? They being the administration? Well, it's America first to not try to solve and, maybe even pressure Ukraine into some form of settlement with Russia. Now it's America first to continue to defend them at the treasure and expense of American money, not yet blood. You think it's not going to turn into the exact same argument for the war in Iran, the exact same argument for support of Israel, which I appreciate. People are going to make the argument. People have made the argument supporting Israel is in America's best interest. I, may or may not agree with all of the arguments. They're the America's only or best ally in the Middle East. I know people take offense at that. They are responsible for giving and sharing intelligence with America. You may or may not agree with it, but that argument has existed for a very long time. They're trying to do this right now. And Laura Loomer, who, all criticism to her, one thing that most people cannot say is that she does not consider herself to be the most diehard MAGA on earth. She loves Trump. So much so that she thinks that her love means never criticizing Trump, although she does every now and again when it goes against some other issues that she supports. The pivot right now is going to be to make it look like true MAGA and America first is to support these endless wars. And they're going to pivot from Ukraine to Iran to Israel to say, now true MAGA, which is also America first, means endlessly supporting and unquestionably supporting these foreign wars with not just American treasure, but American blood, as we've seen from what's going on in Iran this week. That is why I'm focusing on it. That is why I'm particularly intrigued, perturbed by it. Everybody can change their mind if there's a good reason, an understandable arc to it, but flipping 180 literally overnight and then becoming a fangirl account of Zelensky, going on a groveling apology tour that looks more like a struggle session, it's bizarre and it's inorganic. And with that said, people, Viva Fry, how goes the battle? Everybody, former Montreal litigator turned current Florida Rumble. My real name is David Freiheit. Oddly enough, my last name, Freiheit. Bro, you're Canadian. Shut the fuck. Oh, that's awesome. Silver Smurfer -FN5 PR. I am Canadian. I also live in America. I live in the free state of Florida. And if one's geographic location precludes them from discussion of issues of international importance, I would say that your standards and metrics for whose opinion is relevant or who gets to express their opinion are wildly misguided. Happy Sunday, says Joseph-WW3ZR. Let's get this going here. Hold on one second. Let me see where my lost sound. I didn't lose sound, Bill. I took myself out of the screen. This is the Sunday night show with Viva and Barnes. Barnes should be coming in anytime soon. Let me just make sure he's got the link. You got the link, question mark? This show is spread across all platforms: CommuTube, Rumble, vivabarneslaw.locals.com, and X, for whatever it's worth. Don't really care much for X. We do the Sunday show 6 o'clock weekly. We're on episode 325. I do a daily show on Rumble at 3 o'clock Eastern daily. And we have our beautiful community at vivabarneslaw.locals.com, which is the bestest, most above average community out there. And before we kick off this show, it's Freiheit means ma liberté longtemps tu ma garde, says George Nasser. Yes, my last name Freiheit is verbatim German for freedom. So what we do, by the way, we're using StreamYard tonight because we're trying to figure out a glitch with Rumble Studio. We do all of the tipped questions in the after show, which is for vivabarneslaw.locals.com members and Rumble Premium. And I read the super chats throughout the show and the Rumble rants throughout the show. If I miss a Rumble rant or a super chat, and you're going to be upset if I miss it, don't give it. I don't like people being angry. I don't like people feeling miffed, shilled, rooked, whatever the hell. And we do our best here, and we're going to have a kick-ass show tonight. I see Robert Barnes in the house. Sir, how goes the battle?
Good. I got one of the mugs that one of our members sent. One says never in writing. The other one says always in cash. Thanks for that.
Just so long as I'm not spelling the cash or the K yet.
Yeah, exactly. For those that want tickets, tickets closed tonight for 1776 Law Center Conference this weekend. You can get those at 1776lawcenter.com. Midnight tonight, no more tickets to be sold. So it'll be sold out. There's 5 or 6 tickets left. So if you want to get them right now before midnight. Then we're closing off all ticket sales to make sure everything's arranged for this coming weekend. We won't have a Sunday show next week. We'll skip a week because of the conference in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Alexander McCorris coming in from London. Alex Christoforou coming in from Cyprus. Larry Johnson coming in. Daniel Davis coming in. Jim Webb coming in. Dr. Bowden coming in. Brooke Jackson coming in. State Representative Michelle Renaud. Rich Barris, People's Pundit Daily. Chase Hughes, who's been on Joe Rogan multiple times, coming in to talk about how to avoid and detect and defeat a CIA-style PSYOP. The Scott Rouse, Greg Hartley of the Behavior Panel coming in, how to detect deception and communicate honestly. It is a stacked and packed roster, 2 days long, Chattanooga, Tennessee. It supports 1776 Law Center, which supports food freedom, medical freedom, political freedom, and financial freedom in cases and causes across the country and around the world. So if you get a chance to come, go ahead and get your tickets now, hop on, and then that'll be that. Should be a fun and engaging conference, get to meet everybody. We'll even have little trading cards of everybody that was in their 1776 outfits, including Viva Fry, little known French-Canadian revolutionary from the crossing over the border to join the revolution. It should be fun.
No, Robert, what I love is I get when people think I'm from Quebec, they call me French or they call me a frog because they think that's the insulting word for French Canadians, which it isn't. Then they find out I'm Canadian. They say, "Oh, you're Canadian." Or then when they find out I'm Jewish, then I become a Zionist. Even though you and I get accused of being an anti-Semite for having our weekly show with you, who now gets accused of being an anti-Semite. Or 2.5, 3 years ago, you were called a Zionist as well. And so the identity politics it makes people dumb. And they should just stop doing it. But alas, they won't. Robert.
Yeah, it'll be a fun thing. So we'll be exploring basically what are the problems facing different parts of the world and the American political system in those 4 areas of financial, medical, food, and personal and political freedom, the surveillance state, the bureaucratization and globalization and concentration of economic, social, and political power across the Western world, the addiction to war in the Western world, how do we reform our intelligence apparatus, our military apparatus, our representative apparatus. Richard Barris on the latest polling data and public opinion data on where certain freedom-oriented causes and ideas are progressing. Might have some surprise guests that stop in. They're going to some range of people are hoping to stop in. Don't know yet if they'll be able to make it. So just leaving that to the unknown. But it should be a lot of fun. And we'll cover tonight some yeah, exactly. We'll have some.
We're going to launch the inaugural hot sauce. Do I get this in focus here? Come on, there we go. Look at that beautiful packaging. My kids have been labeling and packaging, not all weekend for the last couple hours. So we're gonna be ready and hot to go.
Yeah, we got a big stacked. Some of the cases we'll be discussing are cases of interest to 1776 Law Center. The case, the top voted case, there was no top topic that was preferred. The no top topic got the top vote getter at vivabarneslaw.locals.com. But beyond that, number 2 was the unsettling and disturbing COVID vax immunity case that some of us had been saying was coming because of how broadly and badly written our laws are, how that they are foreclosing any lawsuit of any kind, of any type, for people who suffered disabilities or dangerous or even dangerous injuries and death from the COVID vaccine. Doesn't matter what the circumstances are. Courts are just, we'll get into that case. The Shiloh Hendrix case, some people were mad at me that I wasn't willing to eagerly join the white revolution. Come on, Barnes, you got to join the white revolution.
Robert,
thank you. However, that does not mean her prosecution doesn't violate the First Amendment to the Constitution. We'll be discussing that case. The SCOTUS big forfeiture case has been a hot topic in people paying attention to civil liberties and civil rights and against rogue and abusive governments that have been stealing people's assets under civil forfeiture laws for a while. Supreme Court's been turning a blind eye. They finally took a big case. What happens when you take a 6-pack of beer and you happen to land in a town that's dry? Well, the state of Alaska seizes your $100,000 airplane. They don't only seize your beer. They don't only charge you money. They seize your whole plane. Doesn't that seem like maybe an excessive fine under the 8th Amendment? We'll be covering that case. Trump had election executive orders that went to various courts. What are the updates? Is there going to be any degree of election integrity for 2026? Trump's immigration orders also ran into a range of obstacles, including some surprising obstacles, as a federal district court judge decided to ignore the Supreme Court of the United States. The New York Times grand jury subpoena gets withdrawn after a court scolds the Southern District of New York for the way in which it issued those subpoenas. Google fined over $1 billion for the way it's manipulating search in the search engines. Can the city of Milwaukee ban ICE officers or any federal officer from wearing a mask when doing their duties? That case is in federal court now. Ukraine, finally, the European Court of Human Rights, pretending they're actually a court of human rights, realizing that Ukraine has been illegally locking up its own citizens now for the better part of half a decade. The European Court of Human Rights finally issues a ruling. Models, this got some surprising votes. Maybe people don't know what the underlying suit is. But models win a lawsuit against a strip club. What's that all about? And last but not least, First Amendment and tattoos. South Carolina is trying to ban what kind of tattoos you can make and do and where you can get a tattoo at all. Does the First Amendment prohibit it? A major suit filed on this version of Law for the People.
Robert, let us start with Shiloh Hendrix and the trial, which lasted almost as long as Carmelo Anthony's murder trial, except it didn't include jury selection. So Shiloh Hendrix, everybody now knows this. I covered it a couple of times last week, and I think I might actually be doing an interview with the lawyer at some point next week. We're locking that down. Shiloh Hendrix is the white woman who was caught on camera allegedly using the N-word to describe an allegedly 5-year-old kid, although now we think he's 9 years old but autistic, who stole some applesauce out of her purse or took some applesauce out of her purse. She flipped out at the kid, allegedly, and then this guy who's recording her, egging her on to say, did you just call that kid the N-word? You just called that kid, and he's following her, and then she says it. The video goes viral. We've all seen it. The guy, Sharmaki, who took the video, happens to be a Somalian individual who was charged with sex crimes on a minor a girl that apparently he lured out of an orphanage and coerced into sexual activity. He was charged with that, and his charges were dropped, putting it in quotes, in the interest of justice. This is a guy who's at a playground with no kids unrelated to the kid at issue, recording a woman who's carrying her own child and following her while recording her, trying to get her to say the N-word, which she does. She initially raised $750,000 off of this, because this was at the time of the Carmelo Anthony battle of the fundraisers. And at the time, she became something of a folk hero for some who say, yeah, enough of the fatigue, I'm putting it in quotes. Oh, we should be able to use that word as well. If they want to use that word, whatever. And you and I had discussed at the time saying, this is not, the right way to wage this war. But we predicted at the time that she would get charged. And having seen the way the trial was going, based on some of the reporting, it was a lynching trial. The judge, the lawyer, whose name is Karanos or Karatos, it's something I have to double check. He was apparently berated by the judge in front of the jury, where she was basically insinuating that he was calling the jury dumb, which apparently he never actually said. She gets charged with 3 counts of disorderly conduct. One of them was dropped, and the other 2 remained: disorderly conduct vis-a-vis the kid by using the N-word, and disorderly conduct vis-a-vis the man who was charged with sex offenses against the minor, who had his charges dropped in the interest of justice. And she was found guilty by a verdict on that one. Apparently, the judge kept the jury there until 10:30 at night. I don't know if it was effectively to coerce some form of conviction. Apparently, the jury instructions, or the piece of legislation at issue here, is arguably, but not arguably, unconstitutional as relates to words that tend to incite, whatever disorderly conduct. And she was convicted on 1 count, sentenced to 200 hours community service and $1,000 fine. You took, I say, Andrew Bronca. There's no fight here. He posted a clip of you and I talking about this before I think it was even before charges, as the fundraiser was going wild, and your views on race relations. And I was getting criticized for being a Canadian and I'm not understanding race relations in America. But some of the stuff you said was very old, and you're taking flack for it. I don't know what people think you need to atone for. But what is what's your view on what just happened by way of the constitutionality of this trial, the actions of the judge as they're being described, and where this goes on appeal?
Yeah, so it's a young lady who made a bunch of money and is not going to face any prison time, any real consequence for using the N-word, getting prominent for using the N-word, raising money for using the N-word because she's being so badly victimized, and it's not going to serve any time at all. I mean, what a crock. So people trying to make her some sort of icon, some sort of hero, you look like the fool. You look like the embarrassing person. That does not mean the case doesn't violate and her prosecution and her conviction doesn't violate the First Amendment to the Constitution. So let's separate out these concerns. There's people that want to conflate them together. There's people out there that call themselves ethno-nationalists. Just call yourself a racist. Say what you are. Come on. Come out of the woodwork. Come out of hiding. We know who you are. We know what you are. So I refuse to take the race baiting on this, period. And refuse to endorse her behavior and refuse to endorse her making tons of money. If the race roles were reversed, the same people praising her would be critiquing her. It makes a complete crock of a lot of these people. And then people pretending there's some like white movement or something. I mean, come on. You're playing into every stereotype and caricature out there and undermining whatever cause you purport to be supporting. So I've got zero sympathy and empathy for that crowd. That should not be conflated like the left and some of the statists would have you do with the First Amendment issue present in this case, because fighting words are always a bogus basis of prosecution, in my view. The Supreme Court hasn't affirmed one in 100+ years. So now this is because the Supreme Court came up with this crap, pretending that what the heck were fighting words supposed to mean in the first place? Made no sense.
May I just to parentheses there, because oftentimes I say, fighting words where you go up to a man and you say your wife is a fat whore and he punches you in the face. Now, it's not, as I always understood it, it's a mitigating factor for the individual who carries out the assault. It's not a crime in and of itself.
It shouldn't be, but right now the Supreme Court has refused to clarify this. Last time I think they made a fighting words interpretation was 1942. In a New Hampshire case, where, by the way, they overturned the conviction of a Jehovah's Witness who went right up to a cop and said, you GD fascist, this, right in his face. And the Supreme Court said, nah, that what they really, and what has happened over the last decade plus is that the fighting words cases, as they've gone up to state Supreme Courts, as they've gone up to various appellate courts, have increasingly been limited and limited and limited. The irony of this is it used to be left-wing jurisdictions that were the ones taking the lead at not prosecuting this, and left-wing judges who were the ones striking down prosecutions based on fighting words cases. Now it's the left taking the lead in prosecuting fighting words cases, trying to reinvigorate fighting words prosecutions, and it's left-wing judges like this judge did, who even gave a ridiculous instruction on implied bias. What the heck is that crap? That's not part of the law. So, double check your implied bias to make sure you're not secretly prejudiced. Garbage. I am with Justice Thomas. I'm a strong believer in a race-neutral constitution. That means I don't embrace white racism. I don't embrace black racism. I don't endorse anybody's racism. The Constitution is race-neutral as it needs to be, as it should be, as it deserves to be, as our founders helped write it to be when they put in the 14th Amendment in 1865, or thereafter 1868 officially passed. So that was so you can tell where the judge is going. The fact he scolded the case should have been dismissed. So here's what the Supreme Court itself has never clearly ruled on this question.
This is the statute in Minnesota. So disorderly conduct, anyone who engages in brawling or fighting, and that's clear enough, disturbs an assembly or meeting not unlawful in its character. So you go in and you, mess up city hall, whatever. You can understand that. Engages in offensive, obscene, abusive, boisterous, or noisy conduct, or in offensive, obscene, or abusive language tending reasonably to arouse alarm, anger, or resentment in others. Now, this is, again, it's not a question of ratifying or agreeing with this. The states passed these idiotic laws. Canada's passed the same idiotic, standard of hate speech. And when the likes of Jake Lang go out there and smack a bacon on a Koran, and you say, like, you're asking for trouble by doing it, they have the legislative basis now to go after you, even if you think it's a violation of your First Amendment rights to do something stupid like smack a Quran with a bacon. But at the end of the day, that is so vague and ambiguous. I don't even know how to read it in a way that doesn't allow whoever wants to read criminality into use of the N-word to do so, or read out criminality. If a black person said it, well, then I guess it wouldn't be boisterous or tending to arouse whatever that criteria was. So how do you, the constitutionality of the provision itself at the state level and whether or not it violates the Constitution, who gets involved in that?
So they have to evaluate it because it's applied to the states. Through the First Amendment is applied to all the states through the 14th Amendment. So you have this, and there's usually state constitutional analogs that are also at issue. In other words, provisions in the state constitution that have the same principles and precepts, and Minnesota does as well. And what you're identifying is that there's both the First Amendment and 14th Amendment is due process as well. But basically, there's a due process and free speech issue present. And so the due process issue is whether it puts a reasonable person on fair notice of what's criminal. And as you point out, that's so vague, so obscure, then it's potentially void for vagueness. And several of these statutes with very comparable provisions have been struck down by other state courts and other federal courts on just due process grounds, on void for vagueness grounds. But on the free speech grounds, what they have said is that statute, it has a almost identical language, has been found unconstitutional by a range of states across the country. Now, it's often left-leaning states. Back then, it was in the 50s and 60s and 70s that left-leaning states like California was taking the lead on striking down laws exactly like this. And so basically where the courts have come down and where they're trending is that speech alone cannot constitute disorderly conduct unless the state proves beyond a reasonable doubt that the words used were fighting words. And what do they mean by that? That the fighting words are words that constitute personally offensive phrases that, when spoken to an ordinary person under the particular circumstances of the case, are inherently likely to and imminently likely to provoke a violent reaction or an imminent breach of the peace. And how they've later interpreted that, they've restricted it even further to say the other circumstances, the situation, the context, the individuals required to show that there is a clear and present danger that using those words under those circumstances will, in fact, imminently erupt in a violence, in a violent reaction. So you're getting back to the other First Amendment cases. Think about Brandenburg, right, where the person went in and said, "Let's kill all the N-words," so on and so forth. They said that couldn't be constitutionally prohibited. That couldn't be constitutionally punished. So if that can't be, how can this? Where particularly the jury found her not guilty of saying it to the kid, only found her guilty of saying it to the man. And the man was provoking her to say it again. She's saying it as she's walking away. She's not saying it believing it's going to result in imminent violence of any kind. It, of course, not only it didn't, but there was no reason to believe that. So why did the jury split their verdict? It was because the judge failed to give a proper First Amendment instruction and interpreted the law in the most liberal, broad way possible, and even reinforced it by lecturing them about implied bias and other hogwash. So I think his jury instructions, he denied the proposed instructions by the defense. The state never should have brought this case because it's a First Amendment violation to even bring this prosecution. And I think the end effect of all of this is going to be that the more disorderly conduct laws are going to be struck down, that they will be interpreted, and that the hate speech codes that a various range of left-wing jurisdictions have been trying to reimpose by going against the traditional First Amendment advocacy that left-leaning courts previously had, is now going to get struck down across the country. In this case, of all cases, you prosecute this case, it's a ridiculous case to prosecute. It's utterly nuts. It's much ado over nothing, to say the least. I get there are people out there that can't wait for the race war. Who cares about those losers and lunatics? Otherwise, this is a garbage case brought by garbage prosecutors and handled by a judge who issued garbage rulings. And I think it's going to get overturned, and it's long overdue to get overturned. So the First Amendment is robustly enforced and strikes down all these would-be hate speech code enforcers across the country.
Yeah, but my understanding is one of the reasons why the charge, she was found not guilty on the statement to the child, allegedly, and I don't think it had to do with it wasn't caught on camera. The kid couldn't understand it. The man who was charged with sex crimes could understand it, even though he was the one pursuing her, egging her on, and arguably harassing her to say it in the first place.
Technically, the standard's supposed to be a reasonable person, not subject to that individual. So it's the circumstances of what she knew about the individuals he was speaking it to. But technically, that shouldn't have been a factual factor in the jury's verdict. It should have only been, would the person saying this know that it is likely to result in imminent violence? And they want the imminent incitement is the standard for Brandenburg and everything else. It will be superimposed on all the disorderly conduct provisions by the Supreme Court sooner rather than later. And this case will probably be one of the signature cases to do it. So the prosecutors who are seeking to impose their speech codes, their hate speech codes, through the disorderly conduct laws, what they're going to get is they're going to get those hate speech codes gutted for forever. And that will be a good ultimate constitutional consequence of this otherwise nothing burger case.
Robert, this one, there's no segue. I want to, there's two issues that sort of join into this one. And, we'll get to deal with the Ukraine abuse, human rights abuse. But I need to pick your brain. You might have discussions with people closer to the administration than me. Have you seen Laura Loomer's 180 on Russia and Ukraine?
Yeah, you talk about another grifter. There's so many grifters out there these days. There's this case that had all kinds of grifters on both sides of it. Like that Somali child molester running around a playground, which is the real guy.
Alleged. Well, I guess he's not alleged. He was a charged child molester.
He was charged. Probable cause was found. Yeah, no doubt about that. People should look at the kind of Somalis we brought in. We brought in the worst of the worst. People connected. I mean, Ilhan Omar herself is connected to a man who used to run death camps in Somalia. I mean, her father. So, I mean, just we brought in some of the most horrendous people on the planet in that regard. But you got all kinds of other race grifters running around, but and just grifters in general running around. But Laura Loomer is just the latest in that. Totally bogus. I've been telling people for years she was, she was not a relevant, important, impactful individual. Certain people took the bait on promoting her, said that you're going to regret that. That she's someone that for the right check will flip a script as quickly as you can. That is when she's given her permission out of the nut house that she normally belongs in. So the fact she's running over to endorse and praise and revere Zelensky, and immediately could see what kind of intel op it is, because the MI6 boys are running stories in the Daily Telegraph about how MAGA is now fully behind the Ukraine war and fully loves Zelensky. Look at Laura Zeher,
But
who is nothing
my question.
Representative of MAGA at all.
Do you think her instructions, this is all speculative unless you know better, are the instructions coming from the administration itself, which is to say now prime the media?
Well, not there's two things going on. There's the CIA and the deep state running the dirty war in Ukraine, and then there's the administration, and the two sometimes cross over and frequently don't. So I doubt people at the top of the administration have any clue what's going on. They might see her over there, but they're not the ones who are organizing and orchestrating. Mm-hmm. Trump apparently didn't even know the CIA was trying to murder Putin when they did that attack in December, that he was caught off guard entirely. That's the reality. The deep state does whatever they want. Trump sometimes belatedly intervenes and and tries to prevent it. Mostly he just rubber stamps it after the fact because he doesn't want to be embarrassed and humiliated that he's not even in control of his own government. But it's the reality by anybody that knows the behind the scenes backstory. So that's the reality. They run their own operation. They do. I mean, it was like the rogue operatives that were trying to get Dr. Parsi deported. Nobody in the State Department had approved that. Nobody in the political apparatus. I mean, other people were. The government just runs on as if we don't have an elected president, and they really have been doing that since 1963, when we assassinated the last elected president to put his foot down.
When it came to when Laura says, she thinks she'd be arrested by Putin and Zelensky's much better, and I said, Gonzalo Lira might want to enter the chat now if he were still alive. And so one of the topics we have tonight is two Ukrainians who have been detained in pretrial detention for allegedly assisting Russian forces, directly or indirectly through apparently providing medicines and medications,
or just having a bakery shop. In one case, that Russians bought baked foods from. I mean, it's stuff like that, or having a basic factory that the range of people bought from. Basically, they took a 56-year-old married father of two, that was staying in his home, that wasn't even running any ongoing operations in terms of his everyday business operations in the eastern part of Ukraine, which has long been in favor, that's ancestrally Russian and historically Russian, speaks Russian, that rebelled against the Maidan coup of 2014 because their elected president was illegally removed by the Lady Lindsey Grahams and the John McCains of the world and the Victoria Nulands of the world. And they've just been locking people up all across Ukraine without any constitutional due process, without any respect for very basic human rights. And the European Court of Human Rights has been turning a blind eye now for years. These people just they're denied bail. There's, as the court noted, there was absolutely no grounds to deny them bail. They're detained for years without trial. There was no grounds for that. You look at the underlying facts that are alleged, they can't even come up with facts that constitute cognizable crimes under the European Human Rights Convention. And so finally, the European Court of Human Rights recognized that what Ukraine has been systematically doing is a complete violation of very basic human rights and human liberties. People like Gonzalo Lira were tortured inside their prison, his father extorted to get his release, and then he was recaptured and murdered and he was a U.S. citizen, living in Ukraine. And that's who the Ukrainian government has been. And anybody connected to endorsing or supporting the Ukrainians is an embarrassment to themselves and to America, and to anybody who cares about very basic human rights and human liberties.
And this is another one of the situations where two things can be true at the same time. Putin might be an oligarch, and it doesn't mean that Zelensky isn't, effectively, let's say, a tyrant who still hasn't held any elections because of martial law. And it's in virtue of the martial law that these detainees were basically either continually detained or justified in terms of not being released because, martial law. So anyone alleged to or accused of conspiring with the enemy, being Russia, indefinite pretrial detention, and the United Nations Human Rights Court, is it the EC?
This is the European Union.
The
European Court of Human Rights, not an EU court, because it covers signatories that are not part of the EU. So it's people who've signed on to the European Convention of Human Rights. This was the same provision that Julian Assange was asserting rights under when the Biden administration cut a deal rather than risk losing the Assange case before the European Court of Human Rights. There was talk of whether Bibi Netanyahu would be arrested for violations of either that convention to which Israel's not a party, or the warrants pending by the International Criminal Court to which both the U.S. and Israel are not a party. Mayor Mamdani of New York admitted that there's no legal authority by which the city of New York can arrest Bibi Netanyahu, even though he ran on that as part of his mayoral campaign. That some of us knew that at the time when he was doing it, but it was good politics for New York City at the time. But it just, you take, there's only one between Ukraine and Russia. There's only one country that systematically denies people that has somebody in power, and an entire government in power that hasn't been elected to that position of power, that has ruled out and banned all meaningful opposing parties and political opponents, that is banned people of the most popular celebrated religion and church, and is seizing the assets and arresting the priest of that church in their country, and that is violating pretty much every core human right and civil right either known to America or to those that are signatories to the European Convention on Human Rights. And that is Ukraine. That is not Russia. And that reality continues, and some people decide to turn a blind eye to it, and just tells you a lot about them more so than it does Ukraine.
So, but what is I don't know the binding nature of this ruling from the European Court of Human Rights, ECHR. Did Ukraine have to release these two?
They're supposed to, yes, as signatories, unless they're going to no longer enforce even those provisions. And how are they going to do that while they're begging to be members of the European Union? Some of these issues, their discriminatory treatment of political opponents, they've banned. There's no free speech in Ukraine. There's no free media in Ukraine. There's no freedom of religion in Ukraine. There's no freedom of association in Ukraine. And you can be tortured, murdered, and extorted from, or kidnapped and forced to the front, or kidnapped and put into human trafficking rings, even if you're a Ukrainian citizen or an American citizen or a citizen of another country of Europe protected under laws and treaties that Ukraine is a signatory to, because they're run by a rogue regime that is one of the most corrupt and criminal in the history of Europe or the world. And it's sad and pitiful that we're continually involved in it. I saw the president this week pretend that we're not involved in it. Just go back to see what Secretary of State Rubio said 2 weeks ago before Congress, when he said, yes, we are selling weapons directly to Ukraine. And yes, we are still selling those weapons to Ukraine. The International Monetary Fund, of which the U.S. is the principal funder, just issued a bunch of more money to Ukraine. So while Trump's like, what? There's a weapon? I don't know what that's about. Well, why would Russia be concerned about that? In the real world, everybody knows otherwise, sadly and unfortunately for the president. So that is what it is. But it goes to one of the other great failures of this administration, which is the president, as we speak, is writing billion-dollar checks of taxpayer cash to Big Pharma to continue to push its COVID vaccine on the American people.
Hold on. Before we get there, Robert, Surfinbird1238 says, does not USA suspend habeas corpus during war? Isn't the same thing as what Ukraine does, and not a Ukraine defender? Just curious. What are the rules?
No, in fact, the suspension of the attempt by Abraham Lincoln to suspend the writ of habeas corpus was, in fact, ruled illegal and unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of the United States during the American Civil War. So the idea that so there's a war pending, so you can suspend all civil rights and civil liberties. Not legally, you can't. Not constitutionally, you can't. So are there people that try to do so and get away with it? Yes. Like the Korematsu case, where we locked up Japanese people. But is that going to be the precedent that you're going to want to cite? You're going to as support? That's rather embarrassing and humiliating if that's the position you're taking.
Let me read a few of the Rumble rants over on Rumble before we get into the big one. King of Biltong says, did you know Biltong makes exceptional travel food? Clean, protein-packed, grass-fed, air-dried beef with great flavor. Go to BiltongUSA.com. Use code BARNES for 10% off. Check it out. It's delicious stuff, people. Randy Edwards said, one group ban it, call the other group lazy and shiftless, and the other group cannot say ask. I'm going to read that again, see if I get it. We will see you in Chattanooga Friday, says King of Biltong. And Election Fraud Archives. Barnes, give us your elevator pitch as to why Rubio should never become president.
Well, he never will become president. He's just he's how do you spell Bush in Spanish? Rubio. And that answers your question.
All right. Now, Robert, what's going on with the Trump administration continuing to fight the COVID injury lawsuits?
So what the Trump administration is doing is they had Congress authorize billions of dollars more of your taxpayer dollars to continue to subsidize Big Pharma for pushing its COVID vaccine on the country in the currently passed budget. So that big beautiful bill, things like that. There's a bunch of money that CDC, like people were blaming Kennedy. Kennedy had no control over it. Congress and the president had signed to push a bunch more money to COVID vaccines. He can't just refuse that because Congress is the one that, and the president is the one that made it into law. While that is going on, the people that were injured and that suffered severe disability and even death have been trying to bring suit against the various COVID vaccine makers in the U.S. In this particular case, they brought a breach of contract suit because it was a Utah preschool teacher, along with others, who signed up to be part of the clinical trials for the COVID vaccine, in this case, AstraZeneca, but other ones have also sued Pfizer. And what happened is they misled her, as was documented and detailed in the 1776 Law Center supported suit, Ketam suit, by Brooke Jackson, the Pfizer whistleblower. She disclosed that they were lying to the people participating in the clinical trials as to the safety of what was taking place, and in so doing, breaching their contractual agreements with these people that came in to say, okay, I'm willing to participate in this clinical trial to support the effort to get a vaccine, but you're going to sign a contract with me you're going to be bound by. And I've been trying to tell people, there are a bunch of people that thought you could sue this way and that way. It's like you look at the breadth of the PrEP Act and you look at the bias of the judicial branch. You combine the two, they're going to find there's no way to sue at all until that law is changed. And that is precisely, unfortunately, what happened. They said you can't bring any suit of any kind, anywhere, any place, anytime, if there's the most casual and distant connection to the COVID vaccine. Doesn't matter how distant it is. Doesn't matter how disconnected it is. There's people that have gone into a CVS, slipped and fell while they were there to try to get a COVID vaccine shot, and courts have said, can't sue for that. They were there for a COVID vaccine. Everybody magically immune. It is the broadest scope of immunity given to any private company in American history. And a court just said nobody can sue, even people who participated in clinical trials who had specific contractual promises that would be given honest and accurate information and were systematically lied to and suffered severe injury from. So it's just the latest outrage in these COVID vaccine cases, but it shows we've got to scrap and get rid of the PrEP Act once and for all. This case proves that beyond any doubt.
I need to know in the chat, someone said Styx Hexenhammer, I presume, is dying, and I need to know, this is on the CommuTube side of things, I need to know what the hell is going on. I don't want to spread rumors, and I don't know if he's actually dying, and I don't think he is, but maybe he is. But I know, Robert, so I mean, this is basically all PrEP Act. I mean, this is the immunity given by the PrEP Act. And so even if you were to, they're going to phase out the PrEP Act, that's what RFK Jr. is attempting to do by 2027, 2028? Oh,
no, it's only the immunity they have going forward. The PrEP Act's still there.
So they phase out the immunity going forward.
Right. There will not, and that's only a year from now. So anytime anybody takes the COVID vaccine after June of 2027 can bring suit, but nobody who suffers injury. And watch, they'll pull it. They'll pull it rather than send it out there because they know how dangerous it is. So, but anybody that was hurt prior to June of 2027 has no remedy, no matter the circumstances, according to this federal court. No matter under what circumstance. And to give you an idea where the federal court's bias are, just this week, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals said the Amish have to force their kids to take vaccines, even if they're in private schooling, even if they're in Amish schooling. They denied the Amish any religious objection at all. Said you can't take any religious. They're trying to make, control your body. You got the surveillance state trying to control everything by monitoring you constantly. And that gets abused repeatedly, whether it's the flock cameras or comparable systems, and the Palantir system that Trump is neck deep swimming with, those big tech surveillance boys and bros, and at the same time, control your body while they're trying to control what food you eat by harassing the Amish and there was another big outbreak that occurred, and it's systematic over another food product. There's more. Every week there's because they've corporatized and monopolized the food supply. And they're even trying to drive out the Amos Millers of the world, the Amish farmers of the world, where you can buy food directly from the farmer. They don't want you to have that opportunity at all. They want to foreclose it. But some people had pretended that the PrEP Act wasn't as broad as it was. Some members of Congress were pretending that. Oh, no, don't worry. It wouldn't apply under those circumstances. It wouldn't apply to this situation, so on and so forth. And I was like, nope, read it. It's ridiculously broad. And if you understood how biased the court system is in favor of Big Pharma, in the pocket of Big Pharma, then you knew without clear congressional reversal, this unfortunately was coming. And the only possible source of potential relief or remedy for the vaccine injured. Purportedly the court said, "Oh, don't worry, you can always go to the vaccine court." That court does next to nothing. Now I know Kennedy's trying to fix that and make that robust with robust funding, but the only way it's going to have funding is if the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals reinstates Brooke Jackson's case against Pfizer, the Ketam case, because Brooke Jackson has already said all the monies recovered and received from that are not related to her employment case, but are related to the whistleblower part of her case, is going to be set aside as a fund for the vaccine injured and the vaccine, disabled and those that were killed by it. And that data, I mean, you've interviewed some of the doctors involved. I mean, that data continues to accumulate. Dr. Bowden is coming to the 1776 Law Center Conference, sees people every day and hears from people every day that have suffered disability and injury from it. Richard Barris, also coming to the 1776 Law Center Conference, is going to be talking about what his survey data shows, that you've got that almost every American now knows somebody within a few degrees of separation that has suffered a severe injury from the COVID vaccine or even death. And what's the president doing about it? Writing him more checks.
It is, I don't even know where to phrase the question in terms of the criticism, where you have RFK Jr. trying to establish some form of framework for presumption of injury and compensation for injury. And then you have Albert Bourla, visiting the White House and Trump continuing to promote the jab. It's not, you could either get it's Fifth Circuit where Brooke Jackson is on appeal.
Yeah. This case was out of the Sixth Circuit, but their eagerness. I mean, the district court, by the way, had denied the motion to dismiss. They came up with the most lame grounds to take the appeal. It's like, how did you get an appeal? It's in the discovery stage. Why is there an appeal? Not supposed to be a right to appeal. But when it's Big Pharma, the federal judges come running, and they throw out all those appellate restrictions. Oh, we're standing and mootness, all these things we care about. Bunch of liars and frauds that they are. And they find, this is somehow a collateral order rule. What a bunch of hogwash. What a bunch of lying judges. That's what they are. Just whores for Big Pharma, harlots for big corporate power against the interest of the ordinary person. It's not a coincidence that the biggest fanboys of eugenics weren't the Nazis, but were federal judges in the Supreme Court of the United States of America. They're the ones who invented and originated and popularized eugenics. When Adolf Hitler was campaigning on his Nazi slogan, his favorite citation was to the Supreme Court of the United States of America, advocating those causes and ideas. And it's horrendous. It's a moral horror. It's a failure of the Trump administration. I know Kennedy's trying to do what he's trying to do, but he's been hamstrung and limited and cabined in his capacity to deliver on reform and remedy. And this is just you sign a contract that's outside of the PrEP Act altogether, and all of a sudden, because the federal district court said, look, this is a contract case. This is outside of the PrEP Act. But what's the point of the contract if it's never enforceable? Because it's a PrEP Act product. And what they're saying is that the Pfizer and AstraZeneca and these big corporations knew they were lying to people, committing crimes under state law. Somebody out there should prosecute them for this. Convincing people, oh, hey, we guarantee you these provisions. We guarantee you safety and security. We guarantee you accuracy and information. We guarantee you they will be held responsible if we breach this. Oh, by the way, we knew at the time we did it that the contract had no enforceability at all ever because of this federal congressional law of a bunch of people in the pocket of Big Pharma.
But I guess the question is, it's the DOJ that would have the authority to reinstate or to take up the defense and reinstate the Brooke Jackson case. Can
it's the DOJ that's demanding dismissal. It was the DOJ that was demanding dismissal, and they're still demanding dismissal from the Fifth Circuit of Brooke Jackson's case.
But can RFK do anything to make a recommendation that the DOJ?
He can say that to the DOJ, but he doesn't control the DOJ. So the reality is, there's nothing he can realistically do.
It's very upsetting. Okay. I mean, it's that was the biggest one, and there will be no justice and no justice, no peace, no compensation for those who were coerced into taking that jab and got injured by it.
And listen to one of the things that the mainstream media is not covering. You can go to the Brookstone Institute and others and see the details. But look at the Fauci diaries that came out. That should have been inflammatory information. You know, what Tulsi Gabbard, when she was leaving, detailed Fauci's long-standing role in developing bioweapons, and that COVID was, in fact, a bioweapon itself, developed in secret by Anthony Fauci and his pals and friends and allies, and then covered up. Well, you read some of the extraordinary admissions in Fauci's diaries, and you can see why Biden gave him such a long, extensive pardon. There should be at least a reconciliation commission, something. But we're not seeing any such action, unfortunately.
Well, actually, now I pull up a question here from our locals community. Viva, what about the pending Fauci appearance in a Senate hearing that is coming up the week of the unclassified DARPA memo? Yeah, Fauci's testifying. I think
it's good. I mean, in my opinion, he's got limited Fifth Amendment rights because of the scope of that pardon. So does he take the Fifth? Does he? If he doesn't take the Fifth, can he take the Fifth? Can he be referred for contempt for misuse of the Fifth? When he didn't really have a legitimate Fifth Amendment objection? Would the DOJ prosecute him for contempt, or does he go in and lie? Does he commit? I mean, credit to Senator Rand Paul for forcing Fauci back before the Congress. And now the question is, if he lies, is he held accountable? Is he held responsible by this Justice Department? Unfortunately, I'm not going to hold my breath.
There's a comment in our vivabarneslaw.locals.com community that I'm not going to bring up, lest someone think that it's something I would condone. All right, Robert, another one. I'm throwing it in just because the news has been in the week. Andrew Tate and Tristan Tate are apparently still in a special housing unit, although there's some disagreement as to whether or not it's being qualified properly. They're still being detained in court. Andrew Tate, if we can see this here, I'm in special housing unit, faucets broken, not allowed bottles of water in SHU, nothing clean to drink. My only water comes from the shower, warm and from a brown and filthy faucet. It has given me persistent stomach problems. The water I'm drinking is not clean. I'm an American, innocent until proven guilty, but I am forced to drink poisoned water. What are my rights? How does this extradition work? Like, is there not a way to, speaking of pretrial detention that is arguably abusive, how long do they get to detain someone on a indictment to a foreign country instead of authorizing pretrial or pre-indictment hearing release and take the passports and put an ankle monitor on them?
Yeah, I mean, it's bail. To me, the bail, if he's been denied bail, it looks like he has. I haven't followed the details of the proceedings. I don't know whether there's been a full adjudication on that yet. But they often do detain him throughout the whole extradition process. To me, it's a violation of the Eighth Amendment, that it's a denial, it's a failure to provide. It's basically excessive bail, which is prohibited under the Eighth Amendment. And I don't see why. I mean, given that he was here voluntarily, knew of the pending possible, knew the UK's involvement in trying to get him prosecuted, was contesting that in the courts, had been granted bail by Romania to travel to the United States. So there was an independent adjudication that he was not a risk of flight and would show up for purposes of trial and potential punishment, which is the Eighth Amendment standard. So it seems like the Tate brothers are being wrongfully denied their rights to bail. And I've long been an advocate for bail, no matter who the person is. Some people condition their belief in bail based on who it is that's being prosecuted. I do not. The Constitution does not. That doesn't matter whether it's Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein, Sam Bankman-Fried, or the Tate brothers. They are all entitled to bail under the Eighth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. And in my opinion, they are being improperly denied that constitutional right because our courts are more concerned with the perception of being soft on crime than they are concerned with enforcing our constitutional rights and remedies prior to a person's conviction of any such crime. But that same Eighth Amendment issue is going to be right back before SCOTUS on the issue of excessive fines. And the big case they only took one. It was just deny. They love to deny every honest, conscientious petition before them. God bless those lazy people. But at least they took this one, and this one was a good one to take.
Hold on, I can't say we're there yet because we got one European case, and we're gonna have a bunch of American. While we're talking about corruption in the UK, etc., what tribunal is this coming out of Europe where they fined Google $1 billion for what I believe is exactly what Rumble is suing Google for in terms of antitrust violations, in terms of prioritizing their own product or products, depending on what they are, in their search engine over competitors by featuring theirs from which they derive more profit more prominently, even if it's unfair or the other ones should be figured higher in the search engines. For those who don't remember, Rumble suing Google for basically antitrust violations or abuse of their monopolistic powers because Google, the largest search engine on earth, owns YouTube, the largest video hosting platform on earth. And when you put things into Google, it always refers you to a video, typically in YouTube for a how-to tutorial, whatever. And Rumble was discovering or realizing that Google was referring to YouTube videos, prioritizing them over Rumble videos, even when the video was only on Rumble. And when they were on both, it would prioritize YouTube. It would refer to videos on YouTube that were not related to the search or less related to the search than videos that were on Rumble. And in so doing, have denied them massive amounts of drive-through traffic and profit. The European Commission, what's the name of the commission? I'll get in a second, fined Google $1 billion under some new piece of legislation or rules of governance in Europe because Google was basically in the search engine prioritizing their own links to their own products to the detriment of others, which might have been more relevant by way of search. And it's basically deceptive and abusive business practices. I'm not necessarily a fan of the European Union or European tech police going after anybody, but when it's Google, it kind of feels a little better. But this is a known abusive monopolistic practice that Google has been doing and getting away with forever. And the question is whether or not this European sanction, this $1 billion fine, is legit abuse or Europe trying to govern, starting with a palatable issue like search engines, but only with the long-term objective of controlling the internet in Europe.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a legitimate rule in this particular case that the Europe, unfortunately, has been better at enforcing their antitrust rules as the big tech than the U.S. has been. The U.S. has abandoned that. Early on, it was going to be supportive of it under the Trump administration, but all the good antitrust people, Gail Slater and others, were all removed by the aid and enabling of the corrupt, criminal, unregistered lobbyists for big corporations known as Mike Davis, along with others. And so there's no enforcement at all of any meaningful kind coming from the antitrust division in the U.S. And this is an embarrassment because, as you point out, one of the big principal victims of this, what Google is doing is you think you're honestly searching. In fact, Google is rigging the search engine to favor people that Google has an economic tie to against those that it doesn't have an economic tie to. One of the most egregious was the way in which they completely suppressed any existence of Rumble. The way it usually works is just the first 3 or 5 or 6 Google sites that will come up on your Google search will be Google favored self-preferencing sites that Google has financial ties to, either advertising dollars or direct investment in. It was even worse in the case of Rumble. And here the Europeans are showing that this is a violation of basic principles, whether it's considered unfair trade, whether they have a specific set of rules that said, stop doing this, big tech. Google refused to stop doing it, kept doing it. And they suffered $1 billion fine. And it's anticipated all the others are going to suffer big fines as well. What it highlights is how illegal their conduct is in the United States and within the states. So somebody here should be doing something about it, but unfortunately, too few are. And so in this particular instance, Europe is dead on accurate to find them. And I think they got off light because I think the real cost of what they're doing is much more expensive than $1 billion.
I mean, hopefully it'll change practices. And I do wonder, I don't know what type of judicial, not precedent, but whether or not this can even be invoked by Rumble as some form of support in their American proceedings. But it's they're being sanctioned for exactly what they've been doing to Rumble, allegedly, but in reality, and how they abuse of their monopoly. But whether or not breaking the two up would change anything, I'm not convinced it would either. So I don't know what the solution is. All right, so I think we're done with Europe. Maybe we're going to come back to it in a bit. So Robert, the plane flies through Alaska with a 6-pack of beer on it, lands somewhere in Alaska that's a dry place, and I warn everybody about this when they say, like, fishing without a license is a very, very serious problem, because if you get caught doing it, or you get caught catching a fish without a license, it's poaching. They don't just take your fishing gear. They don't just give you a fine. They can take your car, they can take your boat, basically anything and everything you have with you, and they can do it under color of law. In this particular case, they seized the airplane under the basis of the, I don't know under what legislative basis. And then the question is whether or not this is an abusive seizure that violates which I want to say the fourth, but I'm not sure if it's going to be the fourth. Unreasonable.
Basically the issue that it become what's happened is, especially over the last 30, 40 years, states, local governments, county governments, state governments. I first heard about this at an eclectic political philosophy conference at Howard University when I was in law school that I was invited to, and it was a wide cross-section of diverse intellectual influences from around the world that were present. And this young man came up from a rural county in Kentucky. And so this was, almost 30 years ago. And he told me, he said, here's what's happening. He said, the sheriffs, the local politicians are in cahoots to find every excuse possible to seize people's assets for the smallest possible infractions. And then the mayor or the sheriff or the deputies riding around in that vehicle a few weeks later. And I was like, what the heck? And that was the beginning of my research into forfeiture laws. What is supposed to prohibit this? Limit it. Sometimes it's civil forfeiture, sometimes it's criminal forfeiture, but often they prefer civil forfeiture. So it's very difficult for you to afford a meaningful defense. And they piggybacked off of the excessive forfeitures and seizures that were taking place in drug cases. As some of us warned at the time, they were going to use people's fear of the drug trade and fear of the drug dealers to create a huge hole in our constitutional rights and liberties. The constitutional right at issue here that is enforceable against the states through the 14th Amendment is the 8th Amendment to the Constitution. It says no excessive bail, no excessive fine, no cruel punishment, no unusual punishments. Fear of abuse of power of the state was written into the very DNA of our founding generation. And this 8th Amendment principle against excessive fines, it goes back to the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta, which is in the 1200s in the UK, said that the king that any fine, any seizure, any forfeiture must be, quote, proportioned to the wrong and not so large as to deprive an offender of his livelihood. So that's what excessive fines was understood to mean for the 600 years, or the 575 years leading up to the Constitution of the United States and the Bill of Rights. And the courts at the very beginning of the time, historically, understood it in the same way. They quote, in order for a fine, forfeiture, or seizure to be constitutional, it had to be proportioned to the offense committed, to the situation concerning the offense, to the circumstances concerning the offense, and to the economic situation, circumstances, and character of the offender. In other words, it had to be fact-specific in its proportionality. What the courts have been doing is saying, if there is a circumstance in which that particular law could possibly make the forfeiture reasonable, then it's not excessive as a matter of law, no matter the facts, no matter the situation, no matter the circumstances, no matter the character of the offense, no matter the character of the offender, no matter any of the conditions that are present. And I
just got to read it. What's the point of punishment if it can't be cruel and unusual?
Yes, indeed. So here you have no more egregious a case than a guy goes in with a 6-pack of beer, lands his plane, and he happens to land in a dry town. I didn't even know they still had those, but apparently they do.
I thought that would be the unconstitutional part of how the hell do you have a dry town? Sorry, okay.
Yeah, that's an old tradition, but it's mostly gone throughout the country. And at first they seize his beer. If that isn't an offense enough, they say no 6-pack for you. You think they dumped it in the river? I don't think so. Those deputies were probably packing it later. Then they fine him $1,500. So they fine him. So already you've got a fine that's way out of whack. That's what, maybe 100 times what that 6-pack of beer costs. And then they say, you know what? We're going to steal your plane. Steal your plane. And they steal the guy's plane. Worth at least 95 grand, probably worth 100 grand. So for a 6-pack of beer, he loses his beer. He has to pay him $1,500 and he loses a $100,000 plane. This is a scam. Civil forfeiture is a scam. Criminal forfeiture is a scam by rogue state governments. And finally, the Supreme Court of the United States is going to take it up.
It's a mob. It's a criminal mob that operates under the pretext of government. It's in my view, it's barely better than what happened in that case with the $2,000 unpaid lien against the house, where they bought it and where they sold it under duress and tried to net the proceeds, even though they only sold it for half of its market value. That at least, you can make an argument that what else are they supposed to do? And they didn't steal it. They just sold it for grossly under market. This is insanity. This is like, know the rules of wherever you go. The penalties are insane. And then we're literally going to steal everything that we can under the, what's the time frame before which this is going to be next year for the Supreme Court?
Yeah. So this will be decided before June of next year. And they took it up in what's called their summer docket. And this is the only one they took. But remember, in the House case, they didn't rule on the Eighth Amendment implications because they said it wasn't properly preserved and whatnot. They only ruled on the takings part of it. So this affords them an opportunity to enforce it from a different provision, which could in turn be enforced against different provisions they use in the takings context. To say if what you're doing is an excessive, disproportionate fine, and to restore proportionality to the individual circumstances of the case. Again, the Magna Carta said you have to consider the economic situation of the individual and can't ever have a fine that strips him of his ability to make a living. That's effectively what they did to this pilot here by stripping him of his plane. That was a critical asset, not only personally, but potentially for his living. So I think they're going to finally restore a robust Eighth Amendment that might finally start to put a stop to this abusive local and state and even federal government power in the forfeiture, seizure, and fine context.
It's one of those cases where you read them and you say, like, it's not possible this could ever occur anywhere except in a Kafka novel, because it's abject insanity. All right, so we'll see about that one. What's a good segue into? I'm just looking at my notes here.
Well, in terms of First Amendment cases, we've got a constitutional cases. It's do you have the right to a tattoo or not?
Oh gosh, so this is South Carolina, where they pass a law. I don't understand it. Okay, the law is, as far as I understand, it's either twofold or two laws. They passed a law which would ban tattoo shops from operating within, is it 1,000 feet of schools, churches, and I want to say something else. I forget. But they ban, licensing tattoo parlors to operate within schools and churches, and make it
and playgrounds too.
And playgrounds. Sorry, I knew there was a third one. Are those adult playgrounds or those kids' playgrounds? But then also to criminalize.
It depends on whether the Somalis are attending.
I was thinking more like these safe injection sites in Canada that they deliberately put next to playgrounds, because you got to get your next generation of dependent citizens from somewhere. They also criminalized a tattoo artist from tattooing people's necks and faces, and I mean,
in their head.
I guess
it's basically everything above their shoulders. You can't tattoo in South Carolina.
So I mean, again, it sounds crazy. I don't even know where the proximity of tattoo parlors to maybe schools and churches. I mean, I can understand it from a Puritan perspective, but not from a legislatively necessary perspective for preserving, harmony and avoiding problems. And I don't even know if there's rules that you can't have a bar or an establishment that serves alcohol within that proximity. But the first one, I can sort of maybe understand. Okay, fine. You don't want it. And to the extent you can still operate somewhere, just not around schools, and you'll find another place for a nice business. Okay. To prevent a tattoo artist from tattooing an adult's face or neck or whatever, if I didn't understand, if the individual were to do it to themselves, I don't know, say in prison or at home, would they be? Is it criminalizing having tattoos on your face effectively?
It's a tattoo artist can't do it any further in South Carolina. South Carolina comes until 2004. South Carolina banned, I believe it was until 2004, banned tattoo parlors altogether. So this is an old provision of the South Carolina law, and the federal courts and the state courts were slow to recognize the First Amendment right to tattoo. Even though tattooing goes back to ancient man, the word itself comes from the Polynesian culture, and that's where the tattoo references their verbiology for it, and that was a deeply embedded tradition within Polynesian culture. But you can find examples of it when they dig up some old remains from 6,000 years ago, and you'll find the dude was tattooed. So this is, classic personal expression. People consider tattoos a particular part of themselves. And so to me, this is First Amendment expression. Most courts have started to accept that. The Supreme Court in 2001 in South Carolina pretended that wasn't the case. But since then, most courts have ruled the other way, saying, including the Ninth Circuit, the State Supreme Court of Arizona, and the 11th Circuit, have come around to, no, this is pure expression. This isn't inherently obscene. And so that both the venue restriction in terms of location, has to meet certain standards. It's a lower standard than the strict scrutiny for the complete ban. The complete ban is going to be under strict scrutiny, and it's not going to pass. What compelling interest does the state of South Carolina have in prohibiting people from putting a tattoo somewhere on the upper part of their body above their shoulders? And how is this narrowly tailored to any such compelling interest? Well, it's not. It will be struck down as a violation of the First Amendment.
I would bet as much as I could on that, because not only that, logistically, people get eyebrows tattooed. If they don't have eyebrows, they get pink tattoo. So where's the line between expressive tattoos versus cosmetic
aesthetic tattoos, or cosmetic tattoos?
And I just double checked.
And if you can paint tattoos, couldn't you impose a dress code on everybody? Where does it stop?
Piercings,
right? Yeah, you could do that, and at times they have tried to do that. That you could force them to have a certain particular look or appearance. That if we don't recognize it as First Amendment protection, the state can control even more of your body than they already do. And so that's it's egregious enough. They're trying to control what food goes in our body, trying to control what medications we put in our body, force medications upon us that we don't even want. Now they wanted to decide how our physical appearance, how we can look, how we can appear, what we can do for our own bodies as we choose. That are not obscene. This isn't about like nudity camps or anything like that. This is about the things that are not necessarily offensive in ways that create all kinds of social turmoil or anything like that. This is about personal expression in a way that's commonly used around the world and throughout history. And as such, the Ninth Circuit, the Arizona Supreme Court, and the 11th Circuit's arguments, and you can read those opinions for yourself, are much more persuasive that this is purely expressive activity, completely protected by the First Amendment. And there is no compelling interest in banning it, no narrowly tailored means of banning it.
And just so everybody appreciates what you showed by way of your hand, you weren't giving people the finger. You have a wedding band tattooed on your wedding finger. I said, Robert, at some point you were better off not doing the tattoo, because if things don't work out, you can take off the ring a little easier than the tattoo.
The guitarist for the Red Hot Chili Peppers told me that years ago at a cigar bar, no less.
Oh, that's funny. So it'll get it's ridiculous. It's insane. But okay, well, we'll see. That's the rights of South Carolina. I guess, is there a Puritan history to South Carolina that I don't know about?
No, but there's a lot of evangelical Christians that are the old boomer types, the kind that put the Lindsey Grahams in the world into positions of power, that don't like anything like that oppose tattoos and see them as a degradation of the body and a violation of the spirit. I got plenty of very strong evangelical friends that have tattoos, so that is by no means universally shared. It's just very small subsector, but it shows you they just disproportionately have influence in the legislatures of the state of South Carolina. And obviously the tattoo parlors didn't make enough donations to the campaign pockets down there to keep this law off the books.
Robert, we got a Rumble rant from Cultivated Mind, who makes amazing products. Everybody check out Cultivated Mind. My interview with him, I think it was 2 weeks ago of last Friday. To anyone going to Joel Salton's farm next week for the
next month.
Next month, I'm sorry. For the next month for the Rogue Food Conference. Can't wait to meet any fellow farmers. Polyface Farms, here we come.
Yeah, Joel Salton's great. We've interviewed him before for Sidebar, one of the great food freedom advocates in the country.
Robert, I guess I don't know how to.
We got a couple of Trump cases, immigration cases, and the election cases. We've got this: when are your deleted posts discoverable if a social media platform happens to be party to the case? Grand jury subpoenas dropped against the New York Times. Can the city and local and state governments regulate federal law enforcement? Milwaukee versus the feds, and the models who won the strip club suit.
We'll get to that one in a bit. For now, let's start with some of the. I mean, I guess it's good news depending on which side of the political spectrum you're on. After there was reporting on Trump having been bequeathed the donation of the plane from Qatar, a beautiful plane. which donation and acceptance of which I defended, which donation and acceptance by Trump I defended at the time, because there's security concerns. I appreciate that. The idea of turning down a donation might have political ramifications, although flip side is people are going to say accepting a donation might have political expectations. You save, I don't know, $400 million of taxpayer dollars. I think he ultimately said he was going to use it as like a museum once his term was over. But people were raising concerns about the safety and appearance of accepting I think it was a $400 million donation from Qatar of a jet. Some reporters were reporting on it, and I guess the administration didn't like some of the reporting and issued subpoenas. They were grand jury subpoenas, correct?
Yeah.
To some of the to the New York Times, to some of the journalists, effectively
and some of their family members.
Some of their family, by accident, Robert, by accident, and some of the subpoenas were mildly deficient, and so they issued these subpoenas. Everybody, I think, rightly should have been somewhat reluctant to ratify this type of behavior, because you want journalistic freedom for the James O'Keefes of the world. You want to avoid what appears to be suppression and censorship, or at least legal threats, even if it involves the New York Times. They had a hearing before a judge. I don't know who the judge. I have to look up the judge's history, because she was a Biden appointee. But the DOJ got sufficiently grilled by this judge. The errors in the grand jury subpoenas, the fact that they went to grand jury subpoenas as the default position and not as the position of last resort. And basically the judge said, you've got inexcusable mistakes in these subpoenas. You're serving them on the wrong people. This looks like government intimidation of a free press, and I'll put free in press in quotes because it's New York Times. You got two choices: I strike it, or you revoke them, or you withdraw your subpoenas. And they withdrew their subpoenas, I guess, to save a little bit of face. I'm not too familiar with this type of law, but one of the things that the judge said was that there wasn't even any investigation launched. You went right to grand jury subpoenas. What is the singularly important or impactful strategy or element of going for grand jury subpoenas? What does that implicate by way of issuance?
Well, I mean, because it's if you don't comply, you can be held in criminal contempt and even criminal obstruction charges. So it elevates the risk of the person targeted. And I agree with the court as to the limitations that should be on the presence of grand jury subpoenas in the first place, and especially as applied to activities of the press. It's too bad the same court system refused to recognize those exact same principles when they were going after James O'Keefe in Project Veritas, and James O'Keefe even after he left Project Veritas. So it shows you how political and partisan the courts are, that they don't consistently apply these principles, but that doesn't make the principles incorrect in their application in this context. And secondly, it shows you how much the prosecutors, including those in the Sovereign District of New York, as they like to self-describe themselves over cocktails, how eagerly and easily and quickly they can act when they want to. So much so they could even get the right addresses, the right people, and the right information inside the subpoenas. But when it comes to more compelling cases and causes, they always seem to just go too slow, so slow they never get around to doing anything. So it's just another reminder that they can act fast when they want to.
The judge was Arun Subramanian. I know that I saw that.
Holy moly. I'm shocked that a judge with that name turned out to be a little liberal.
No, I'm trying to figure out what other cases. Oh, hold on one second. Let me see here. If you mean Arun Subramanian, the politically sensitive cases I found: New York Times subpoenas, fine. Trump administration childcare funding freeze. I don't remember that one. Live Nation Ticketmaster.
He's been good in that one. I got to give him credit on that one.
And the Sean Diddy Combs criminal case. Mike, how many? Is it wild?
That was very dubious way that case was.
Yeah. Okay, so I knew I'd seen that name. It was definitely in the P. Diddy case. All right, so they got their butts, handed to them, and they find the rules for the ones they like and they ignore them for the ones they don't. What do we say?
That's Catherine Herridge. Somebody points out in the chat, the courts don't seem anywhere near as sensitive when she's protecting whistleblowers and is demanded by the grand juries under threat of contempt by courts at $800 a day to disclose intel and information. But when the New York Times, the Honorable New York Times, is a grand jury subpoena, there's outrage. The First Amendment increasingly only protects the corporate press rather than the little guy, and when the whole purpose of it was to protect the little guy, often from the corporate press and its government allies. But we see inconsistent application of it, just like we saw in the immigration context this week, just like we saw in election cases this week.
Oh, yeah. So this one you're going to want to flesh out for us. Trump ordered it's an by way of executive order?
Executive order, yep.
So he issued an executive order that would have implemented or issued some rules that USPS would have to follow in terms of verifying the legitimacy or at least, verifying mail-in ballots. And it would involve making sure the addresses match that. I'm gonna forget what the exact rules that were being issued were, and it was going to basically bind USPS to more properly and more diligently govern mail-in ballots and the deliverance, issuance, and collection of mail-in ballots. NAACP sued. I mean, I guess it's always the same argument. Or I think they sought an injunction to prevent the implementation of these rules in time for 2026 midterms, and they're arguing that obviously it disenfranchises, it makes it more difficult. It gives USPS basically an oversight governance function as opposed to just a collection and delivery function. This is going to be a stupid question. USPS is United States Postal Service. UPS is United Parcel Service. How the hell has there not ever been a copyright fight between USPS and UPS?
Because the federal government has no right of copyright.
Well, that would. Oh, I see. Because it's sufficiently confusing that when you walk into a UPS and you think it's a USPS and they laugh at you when you go in there. But so, Robert, so the executive order tried to issue these guidelines. The question is this: I appreciate for the time being, it might fortify or at least solidify mail-in voting for the next election. I don't know. USPS, I don't know if they're inherently political, but they have been historically political. Is there not a risk that if Trump, if this executive order succeeds even now, that it, somehow gets abused by a political organization when the political tides change in terms of who's president and who's in charge?
That was already happening anyway. So the Biden administration already used the USPS, United States Postal Service, to facilitate and enable mail-in voting in the most liberalized ways, and then failed to follow up on investigations where U.S. Postal Service officers were found to be destroying ballots or that they think were voting the wrong way and things of that nature. The thought process was this: the United States Postal Service is a federal agency under the control of the President of the United States. And how the federal agency conducts its business should be up to the elected President of the United States. And what it said is, if the United States Postal Service was going to be used to deliver mail-in ballots, a particular sensitive category of mail, there needed to be rules governing it to protect its chain of custody and to conform to requirements about ballot election integrity in general. So make sure it's only a citizen. Federal law requires that only citizens vote in federal elections. So they said if a ballot was for a federal election, then that ballot needed to, the person doing it, the state agencies that would be accepting that ballot needed to confirm that it was a citizen. What the president did not want, and his allies did not want, is the United States Postal Service enabling, facilitating, and aiding and abetting the election fraud by people who are not constitutionally qualified to vote, not legally, statutorily allowed to vote in federal elections under federal laws determined by Congress. And in that so they wanted to make sure that the person whose ballot that was inside that ballot was someone that was constitutionally qualified and statutorily qualified to vote under federal law. The second wanted clean chain of custody. And the goal with the clean chain of custody was to have a barcode on all the ballots so that they could be tracked and traced from the time they're picked up to the time to deliver. Mm-hmm. So that way, for example, somebody doesn't pick up a ballot and decide to throw it away and substitute it with another ballot. What prevents a postal worker from picking up a ballot in, let's say, a neighborhood that's known to be a Republican neighborhood and deciding I'm going to toss that ballot and substitute it with another one?
Yeah, because it's illegal, Robert. They would never do that because it's already illegal.
Yeah, exactly. Right. The U.S. Postal Service Union, which often takes positions in these same elections. So the temptation would be overwhelming, especially if you could stop Hitler from winning, as the campaign was in 2020. Now, of course, same logic could apply by Republican postal workers to Democratic ballots. So either way, they wanted to maintain ballot integrity by saying, okay, the only ballots the U.S. Postal Service will take are ballots that have unique barcodes on them and that the ballots are coming from someone who fits a citizenship requirement. Those were the two main components. There were some other provisions also entailed to secure chain of custody through the process. This would reduce the risk of certain kind of, for example, drop boxes from, having people drop off other people's ballots in ways that may raise questions and the like. Now, there's no obligation of state and local governments to use the United States Postal Service. They could choose to use a different one, but they sued saying, well, we rely on this federal agency to facilitate the election fornication we're up to, Judge. So you got to prevent this federal agency from imposing these rules so that we don't have to have barcodes, so that we don't have to have citizenship checks. Now, why would you worry about barcodes or citizenship checks unless you have non-citizens voting, as New Jersey recently admitted just happened in the 2025 elections? Thousands of illegals voting in New Jersey. No question about that. No dispute about that. No controversy about that. They've admitted and acknowledged that it happened. Said it was a mistake, but this was a mistake that was avoidable if these rules were being complied with. Again, this is a federal agency governing federal agency conduct. Why do they have to defer to state agencies that want to facilitate election fraud and undermine election integrity? But, of course, the federal courts D.C. court said, it's not really ripe. There's standing issues, that it really isn't a violation of the settlement issues. It's not clear that these rules are unconstitutional or in excess of their authority. Not clear to me how they're unconstitutional or in excess of their authority. Another federal court said the same thing in D.C. This is D.C., no less. But the First Circuit comes in and says, nope, for these 23 states, you can't, basically Democratic states, you're not allowed to enforce these rules at all. That this would be such a burden on the poor state and local governments. This goes all the way back to states monopolizing the ballot in the first place. If you didn't have state monopoly of the ballot, none of this would happen. But the states grab monopoly on the ballot to secure it for integrity purposes, then create these longer and longer and longer deadlines and internal procedures that become self-justifying and rationalizing so they can exclude people from the ballot and facilitate election fornication. And the federal courts just gave it a rubber stamp.
This doesn't get resolved, let alone implemented for 2026 midterms. I mean, you're going to have
highly, highly unlikely. I hope the government goes up to the Supreme Court. Don't know if they will or they do. And unless the Supreme Court gets involved, the First Circuit has enjoined the enforcement of this for half the country.
All right.
The other cases that were all over the place were immigration cases this week.
Start the immigration. I'm going to need a trigger
so there are
word.
Two different ones. One is an understandable immigration case about visa abuse and habeas rights. But the question is, when does the federal courts have habeas? Is it only through a removal proceeding? Is it through a separate ancillary proceeding? Does it depend on where they're detained? The Supreme Court recently limited the scope of the ability to use habeas in like TPS cases, temporary protected status cases. But a federal judge in Boston is back to making the same rulings all over again, despite getting overturned by the Supreme Court of the United States. And a bunch of people are like, why in the world would that judge do that? Because that judge thinks it's a great way to get nominated to the Supreme Court of the United States when he thinks Democrats are going to be in charge in 2028? Maybe, right? Knows that will be a ring of endorsement of going directly violating the Supreme Court to protect the poor illegals.
Which is it? It's not Boasberg, is it?
No. This is a district court out of Boston. That was issued these direct conflict to what the Supreme Court just ruled a couple of weeks ago. Now on the other side, and there's been splits between all the circuits about when habeas applies, when it doesn't apply, even in lieu of the Supreme Court rulings. Now in another case, this is the underlying politics is part of the problem. So like, for example, Third Circuit came in and said there isn't habeas relief for that Columbia University protester. It's got to go through the removal process, and only that court has jurisdiction, not the other courts that were trying to jump in anticipation of removal. Likely the correct decision. Then what was happening in the federal Fourth Circuit concerning the Virginia case, and it was the underlying facts of the case that were problematic. It's another example where they revoked a visa and tried to deport and arrested a guy and put him on the bus ride to hell, which is what is you keep flipping him between different facilities so that no court gets habeas for long enough, right? Or you put him in a court that has very hostile habeas or hostile immigration rules. The problem with this case is what was this guy's, when he was here on a legal visa, that's part one. Part two, which means he does have certain constitutional protections of freedom of speech. The only ground cited to deport him was his opposition to what Israel was doing in Gaza. This is getting outrageous. Another reason why Narco Marco Rubio will never be president of the United States. He has been systematically using the State Department to violate people's First Amendment rights and liberties again and again and again and again and again. It was a Reagan judge out of Boston that detailed it. And these cases keep coming up and coming up and coming up and coming up, whether it's the Tufts case or this case or other cases, where they're targeting people purely for their political speech and in a flagrant violation of Supreme Court law. And that's probably why that court decided that habeas did lie, because he originally filed the action while he was in custody and detention in Virginia. And so the Fourth Circuit was trying to limit their ability to play sort of judicial roulette by rotating these individuals around different places. But they should stop altogether targeting people for their speech. Quit being the Israel Secretary of State and be the American Secretary of State, Mr. Rubio.
Robert, let me bring up, I think we either got raided or let me see if we did get raided. Lucy the dog says, what God says about tattoos.
Oh, yes, it says Dom T. Main. Who is that?
Dominant One has raided the stream. He always makes the biltongs pounding the back door jokes. Oh, here it is. Would anyone like to try out my new tattoo invention for free? It's much faster than traditional way. It is irons on tattoos. Comes with a free pound of Anton's firm and juicy meat from the king. Lucy the dog says, what God says about tattoos, Leviticus 19:28. Just saying, I think going with God is best. Is that where it says you're made in the image of God and you shan't deface your own body? To each their own. Now, hold on. The other thing I was going to do.
Yeah, I got many deeply evangelical friends who don't consider it defacement. They see it as a form of expression that's consistent with their religious beliefs. I get not everybody agrees.
I'm not your buddy guy says, so Barnes calling Andrew Branca a white supremacist.
When did I do that? When I call Branca
I'm not your buddy guy. If you have to start off.
I'm not referencing Branca's criticism. I'm referencing there was people on Substack and in the ethno-nationalist world whose opinions I track to get a sense of what's happening in that world that were attacking me all week long over the Shiloh Hendrix case because I didn't celebrate what she did.
I'm not your buddy guy. I know you've been around the channel for a long time, so don't read about it. And it might have been a joke. But when it just a word of the wise for anybody out there, if you start off by saying, so what you're saying is, you're already, it's off to a bad start.
It's a from Scott Adams, it's a classic tell that if you start with so, it's a giveaway that your argument is weak, that if you use the word so. That in fact, he argues that if you want to avoid looking weak, always avoid of using the word so. Well, and he called it something else. It was like a form of daydreaming what other people were thinking. It was something, I forget what he called it.
Reading.
Mind reading. That's it. Wow, of course, yeah. I should remember that.
Because you got mind reading, you've got imputing intentions, you've got straw manning. So what you're saying is pretty much all of them because it typically involves mischaracterizing what the person. But also, when Branca played a clip of us on your channel, he wasn't even. It was disagreeing with the idea that not that there is something of a race war, but that this was a white prosecution coming out of Minnesota, Somali Minnesota, in this particular case. I don't even think you.
I'm sure it was.
That's the thing. I don't think you've ever said that this was not a motivated persecution. The clip that he played was at the time when we were just talking about the fact that she was, raking in.
He's not a hero and doesn't deserve a bunch of money. Of all the people that deserve a bunch of money, there's good causes out there. People are getting people that have been injured by the COVID vaccine. The people that have been injured by the COVID vaccine raise less money than some chick running around saying the N-word on a playground. I'm sorry, I don't take you seriously when you think one deserves a bunch of money and another deserves nothing. Sorry, a lot of these people don't want to pretend they're not racist when they really are. Come on, we all know what some of these people are motivated by.
Well, part of me wants to believe
all sides, by the way.
Yeah, I like to think it's mostly just trolling and people they like to put the N in the chat and then everyone.
There's some that are true believers because I track their opinion just to know what's going on out there, and I was attacked all week in the ethno-nationalist world. That a lot of people still the Nick Fuentes fanboys and some of them are in that crowd. They don't understand Barnes. A race war is coming, and you got to be on the side of the race war. I wonder if they realize they sound like Charles Manson.
Well, I wouldn't say that if they do, Robert. Well, speaking of hate crimes and propagandist organizations that manufacture the hate so they can combat it, X is still suing Media Matters for America, arguing that they were basically manufacturing results to create an argument that X is hosting white nationalist or anti-Semitic content
Yeah,
on it.
speaking of white nationalists, yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember now what happened to.
Well, what they were doing was they would say, hey, you big corporate advertisers, if you're advertising on X, you're being promoted by openly racist accounts, neo-Nazi accounts. And they would find these accounts and say, look, here's your ad next to it. They were making it up. The ad wasn't showing up next to any of those accounts. So that was defamation by implication. And so X filed suit on those grounds. And as part of it, X went through and deleted a lot of these accounts for violating X rules or deleting the offending post. And and the Media Matters was demanding access to these posts as part of the discovery.
And just
deleted post.
Yeah, just so nobody quotes you and say you got it wrong, Barnes. What they would do, from what I understood, is they would create a new account. They would follow only big corporate brands and I think only racist accounts. And then eventually, what would happen is you would have an ad running on a racist post, something along those lines. And they were incidentally such one-offs.
But the ad was really to them, as following the corporate account, not on the racist accounts, X feeds.
The bottom line is they actually had to create new accounts and circumvent even the rules and protocols to artificially generate what was a one-off, which I argued at the time actually highlighted X's security features and didn't highlight vulnerabilities. So bottom line, X is suing. I want to double check what the status of Rumble's lawsuit is because I think they were suing as well. And in the context of that lawsuit, Media Matters asks for deleted posts of users from the platform. And not just posts that X deleted for reasons of potentially violating the rules on X, posts that the accounts themselves deleted by their own volition. What's the name of the law that that X invoked? It was a 3-letter SCE.
So the Stored Communications Act, which was passed at the beginning of the digital era, to say that anything someone is keeping for you on any kind of digital record keeper could not disclose that information to a third party without your consent. Okay. And X's argument was you're asking for individual people's post, that not our post as X, but individual people's post, and that raises defenses under the Stored Communication Act.
Well, it was a split decision. The decision makes total sense where Stored Communication Act, which it requires the consent, effectively the consent of the person who posted it, and Media Matters was asking for posts that were deleted by X and by the user. And X said, we're not giving you any of them. The judge didn't split the baby. I think the judge issued the logical order, which is once the user deletes their message, they've made the decision they no longer want it publicly visible. And so reviving that deleted message would violate the agreement that the user had with X in terms of their decision to willingly take that public post off of public access. But when X removed the post for whatever the reason, that post was not removed not by the consent of, but by the intent of the user. Therefore, that one could reasonably be compelled to be disclosed by X. And so the judge basically said, if X deleted the post, they have to retrieve that deleted post. But if the user themselves deleted it, X can't go and override that user's decision or determination to no longer make that post public.
Correct. I mean, basically, that they cannot disclose it unless they are both a party to a case and the underlying post was made publicly available and the user had not retracted it, deleted it, or communicated their desire that it no longer be public. Only those subcategory of posts were discoverable. Otherwise, Media Matters' attempt to completely gut the Stored Communications Act merely because X was a party failed.
All right. Are there any broader implications to this? I mean, sometimes when you
good on X and Elon Musk of continuing to defend users' privacy, even when it might not have been in their interest to do so.
And what do we think is going to be the outcome of this case? I thought there was something. Media Matters did something to frustrate their ability. Okay. There's a detail of this case that I'm forgetting now in terms of where the status is of it. How many cases do we have left, Robert?
Only 2. We've got masks, Milwaukee versus the feds, and models win a strip club suit.
Well, okay. First of all, I do feel bad. I'm not your buddy guy. I didn't read it to the end. So Barnes calling Andrew Barca a white supremacist. Barnes is wrong. It's cases like hers which bring you to becoming the UK plus 250,000 rapes.
Yeah,
rape victims.
I'm saying it violates the First Amendment. So the assumption the person made about my opinion was inaccurate.
That's the issue.
And that's the thing is the we weren't discussing in any existing case back then. We're discussing whether or not she should be a social hero, and people just wanted to avoid that because they wanted to make a particular point that suited or served their purposes. I mean, I guess that was not, frankly, it was not honest. It was dishonest. What a lot of people were out there saying.
No, because
no surprise. It's like the Candace crowd that's always dishonest. Lionel Nation, who's become a joke of himself.
Robert, I don't want to mention it because I don't want to. I want to make amends.
Yeah, a lot of these people are desperate for attention. I mean, Candace is obviously desperate for attention, but the Lionel, it's sad. I mean, he used to be a quality media, political, and legal commentator, and it's confession through projection and saying, what's happened to you or what's happened to these other people? What the heck's happened to you, Lionel? You're a joke. You're a complete joke. You're a crock of yourself. You're just a sad, pitiful grifter running around chasing for one more click. Please click. Please click one more time. Lying about the law regularly, lying about the facts regularly. It's a disgrace what he has become. But a lot of these people they see the Candace Owens ongoing social media opera that she's running, making up whatever loony, wacky, kooky phrase she has. I mean, she was out there trying to pretend she was a deep defender of Alex Jones. She had to apologize to Alex Jones because she never came to his defense when it actually mattered. Candace Owens is a big, fat fraud, and that's all she's ever going to be. I'm not going to pay much attention to her because nobody of consequence cares what Candace thinks. Nobody of consequence cares what Lionel Media thinks. These people are increasingly isolating themselves into a tiny little rabbit hole, like the people who kept emailing me saying, Barnes, you don't understand. Sandy Hook never happened. You've taken the bait. You and Alex have gone down. You don't understand. Alex betrayed the cause by not recognizing that Sandy. I mean, these people believe in gibberish 10 years later, 20 years later. And that's going to be the same thing with the kooky Candace crowd. No, she completely lied about what you said on Turning Point. Completely lied and misrepresented it.
The problem is I think Alex he repeated it. Like I don't know if he didn't see the original clip. I don't know how Alex could have ever thought that I would be.
Well, he knows better. He knows better. I mean, he had me on extensively for debunking a lot of what Candace said at the end of the preliminary hearing. So I think I was on for an hour with him, and he was in agreement with me on that side of the aisle. But he welcomes anybody defending him over what happened in the targeted First Amendment lawfare. But let's be clear, Candace Owens wasn't there. She was running and hiding. Cash and checks, marrying the sons of British barons. That's what she was busy doing. Queen Candace, queen of the grift, queen of the kooks, queen of the crazies. That's what she was busy doing. She wasn't sincere or serious about any of this. And there is no better Mossad asset in the world, even better than Laura Loomer, is Candace Owens, because she discredits by association anybody's criticisms or skepticism about the Tyler Robinson investigation and the investigation into the Charlie Kirk's murder. Well, that's the point you were making, and she was being deliberately dishonest in representing it otherwise. And nobody's waiting to file a Sandy Hook lawsuit against you, Candace, because you're going to be broke from all your other libels over the last half decade.
I want to bring it up. I don't know what the post was deleted by the author, but it says, I think it's important to state that I had Alex Jones on my newest show and publicly apologized, I guess, to him for not having his back when he was censored off Twitter initially because I was new to the movement and scared.
That was her excuse. When she was making tons of money in cash. She wasn't new to the movement. She'd been in it for years.
By the way, that was 20. That was 20.
Okay, I get, she's coward, Candace, for most of her political and public career. No surprise there. But this was always dishonest. It was always disingenuous. She cannot meet. Why won't she debate you? Why won't she debate me? Why won't she debate anybody of consequence? She'll debate Piers Morgan because that dimwit couldn't think his way out of a paper bag. But she won't debate anybody else because she's lying to people. And people are just following her down. Clint Russell, good guy, smart guy, Liberty Lockdown guy. He's getting tracked. He's repeatedly getting trapped in that nonsense. And what people don't understand, the more they pretend that Tyler Robinson had nothing to do with it and attack Turning Point, you are helping whoever it is that truly facilitated and enabled the murder of Charlie Kirk and covered it up. You are helping them. That's what you're doing. That's what the Sandy Hook never happened. People did. It and that was exactly the point you were making, and she lied about what that point was because she cannot debate honestly because she's not an honest person. She's writing on emotion. She's governing by emotion. There isn't logic behind her. There's no receipts behind her. The only time I'm going to comment on her is when she's libeling other people that are in my world or when she's lying about the law to the whole world and confusing people about the state of the law, which she kept doing, which Lionel kept doing. He's a lawyer, for crying out loud, pretending not to know what probable cause hearings are about, pretending not to know about what victims' rights are about. It's a crock. It's a joke. I don't take any of these people seriously.
No, what really pissed me off is the balls to like invert reality and say that I was approving of Sandy Hook censorship, as though I haven't been defending Alex at mild risk.
Frankly, we were the only ones doing it in the social media world. Almost nobody in the legal world was out publicly defending Alex when it happened in 2018, in 2019, in 2020, in 2021, all the way through. And so she knows. By the way, she knows that. That's why she will be constantly. She's reptilian in her constant, continuous, dishonorable deception. And anybody pretending she's a good faith actor is living in a fantasy world. Or they're governed by their emotions because they can't think logically, which is most of her fan base, frankly.
Well, this is why I told someone privately, it's like she's just better at being dishonest than me, because nobody even knows that my appearance on.
Because she's emotional and communicative in how she does it. And then people act like it's, have you read the receipts boards? Obviously, you nitwits haven't. If you cite Candace Owens to me, you're telling me you're stupid. But you're too stupid for me to have to deal with you or address you.
Look. So Lionel says, "What happened to the view?" I don't know why this guy's even tweeting about me, but set that aside.
It's because he's obsessed with attention. That he's been losing. For those that don't know, Lionel used to be a prosecutor, state prosecutor in Florida. Then he went up and became a New York lawyer. He became one of the court TV regulars back in the early 2000s. Became involved as a legal, political, and a media commentator throughout the media space. Then ultimately went to independent media space. But increasingly, his insights are uninsightful. And so he's lost all that influence. You see him almost in none of those places anymore. He initially was critical of Candace for going this route, then saw all the clicks. And he was like, I will be her white knight legal defender and lie about the law and libel other people so that maybe somebody will pay attention to me here in New York City in my little glasses sitting behind my little fake trophies. And that's who he's become.
I just got to bring. So he says, "What happened? He's unrecognizable." To which I say, being called unrecognizable by a useful idiot who actively promotes the exploding microphone theory is actually only a testament to the bad judgment. Look what he posts out. The Officer Tatum's appraisal anent the efficacy of the exploding mic hypothesis was the quintessence of cretinous. I mean,
he used to be very articulate, and he still can have fun with words, but he's just become a complete Candace kook. And I saw this. What you were warning about is what I warned about. Alex at times got tricked into it over the years, which was getting trapped into the people who went completely crazy on Sandy Hook. And there were legitimate concerns that got completely suppressed because people went nuts. And I'm not going to sit back and be silent when I see people going nuts again, like Lionel is right now.
He did this one for those troubled by what they believe to be road exploding mic trajectory angle problems and impossibilities of the Charlie Kirk. And it's a video explaining how it could. Then he put listen to this one. Yes, they gave him a microphone, and ironically, it might have been the very mic that was used as the projectile platform to kill him, according to some hypotheses. This is the guy judging my good sense. What pissed me off a little bit, it was actually not that feelings matter. It was insulting that Alex reposted and commented on Candace Owens, knowing damn well what I've done for 8.5 years, and not for anything, like just because it's right. And I won't regret it any more than I'm going to regret having defended Jake Lang when I felt he deserved defending, and not defending him when he does stupid shit like smack a Quran with a bacon. But the Candace, she's good at being manipulative and dishonest, because she played the clip and she didn't say that I said, that the Sandy Hook should be used. She said, "Oh, that's her interpretation," and nobody even bothered to watch the entire. It doesn't matter. So it's frustrating. It's the nature of the game.
Still think she's going to win that Macron soon?
I think she will, because maybe she's going to make herself look so lacking credibility that everyone's going to say, who takes anything she says seriously? Maybe that's the strategy here. Benny Boy 7670 says, Hawaii Lieutenant Governor Silva Luke indicted.
A bunch of one of the biggest bribery cases. It just broke this weekend, so we didn't have time to cover it tonight.
I'll cover it this week.
And it's a COVID. It's one of the worst bribery cases in the history of Hawaii. No surprise if you know the real history of Hawaii politically.
Okay. We're going to.
We got masks and models.
We'll do that. We'll do that at the after party. Let me read the Rumble. We're going to read all the tip questions over on Rumble on vivabarneslaw.locals.com. Decimal Threat says you can shoot a man for following you in a parking lot, but you can't call someone a name for doing the same thing. No, this is the Shiloh Hendrix. I mean, but it's not even that. The guy was trying to. He
was trying to get her to repeat it. That's why he made notes. Didn't even fit the incorrect jury instructions the judge gave. There was no reasonable person in his shoes doing what he was doing would likely respond with violence to that statement, and so it made zero sense. So it showed you, but the jury was clearly hammered away. Don't let your implied bias basically convict her of something. And now, to me, the utility of it is that now she's got a robust First Amendment appeal. And that would have been something worth publicly supporting, not her saying the N-word on the playground. That was not worth a bunch of money to be sent to her so she could buy a new big house. But support of the First Amendment limitation on hate speech codes, I'm all in favor of.
Okay, what we're going to do right now is let me get this here. We're going to go raid Nerdrotic, Evidence of Giants in History, Forbidden Frontier, Catalina Island. We're going to go raid them, and then the question is going to be how.
Nerdrocket, he's covering giants in the island. Is that right?
Yeah, I think people are trying to diversify subject matter because we're all.
He did some good reviews of the. It looks like Odyssey is going to be real. Your normies love Odyssey. They don't know that it's completely separated from the original point of that great Greek novel. But your normies love it because it's like, oh, look how cool stuff is. So your normies it looks like it's going to make a ton of money, win all the Oscars. That's coming.
Candace is a scumbag. I bet she's a jilted lover. That would suggest that she had an affair with Charlie, which I would never suggest unless. Robert, have they just given up on the receipt from the restaurant? Like that one's over now. Now they're off to who Ben Shapiro had lunch with. Okay, it doesn't matter. I forget it. The question I was just
they don't want to pursue honest investigation. Why was there an unusual security lapse by the university that day? They don't want to pursue that. Why was Tyler Robbins? How did Tyler Robinson get radicalized? They don't want to pursue that. Why are these associations between Tyler Robinson and these other groups that have a history of being infiltrated by intel operatives? They don't want to pursue that either. Why is it these people pursuing the truth don't want to pursue anything that could actually be a promising lead? Maybe because they're there on behalf of the very people that were the conspirators in the first place.
No, and that is like I don't know who would carry out that investigation, but the FBI should have been investigating. But the thing is,
and they shut it down when Joe Kent wanted to investigate.
Well, that's the thing.
But
and they say
the Candace crowd doesn't want to pursue that either. They want to pursue the latest with the what was Erica Kirk wearing at this particular time? It's soap opera crap. Soap opera crap.
Having lunch with. Who's Ben Shapiro having lunch with? And I do question. I know the FBI says they investigated the Discord chats. I just don't believe it. But
they didn't. Yeah, they didn't. They shut down Joe Kent when he tried to. I know that.
Oh, speaking of which, we can end on this before we head on over to the dark side. I think we're gonna do locals. Everybody who's on Rumble Premium, you already can just come and watch as a member. It's behind StreamYard, so it will not. It's in StreamYard, so it will not be behind a paywall. So come on over and just watch it on locals because that's what we're going to do for the after party.
Viva BarnesLaw.locals.com. And if the tickets close at midnight Eastern tonight, if so, you want to go to the 1776 Law Center conference that supports the principal fundraiser for 1776 Law Center that's represented everybody from Amish farmer Amos Miller to Pfizer whistleblower Brooke Jackson, standing up against COVID lockdown, standing up against COVID vaccine mandates as the leading organization to do so, defending Kyle Rittenhouse in the court of public opinion, defending the Covington kids in both for financial, political, medical, and food freedom. That conference is this weekend. So if you want tickets, all tickets close. No more tickets after midnight Eastern. Go to 1776lawcenter.com, and then it's a wrap at midnight.
All right. And everybody, we are just doing locals after party. There is no paywall, so you don't have to complain. I've given everyone the link on YouTube and Rumble. You've already got accounts on Rumble, so you can just go over because I'm using StreamYard. I'm just going to end it on X, Rumble, and YouTube, and we're going to have our after party. So, oh, by the way, and everybody, let me give you the link. It's on Spotify for anybody who complains. You can get the entire stream, including the after party. It's Spotify. I forget what the name of the channel is on Spotify. Hold on. It's called Viva Fry, Recovering Former Litigator. I guess I'm beyond the point of recovery now, so I should probably just have. Oh, it is. I don't want to change name. I'm going to give you the link to the last episode so you can all get your butts and subscribe over there. And we're going to have the after party. We're going to go through all of the tipped comments, and Let me just give this one over on CommieTube, and we're going to end this. And we've already rated, what's his name? Here they go. Nerdrotic. Okay, so now updating over on Rumble on